Okay, I'd like to call to order the Planning and Zoning meeting for December 16th, 2024. Diane, can you call the roll, please?
Jeffrey Meiselman.
Here.
Chris Brown.
Here.
Deidre Strong.
Here.
Allison Thomas.
Here.
Mitch Cass is absent. Judy Malika.
Here.
Gregory Snyder is absent.
Okay. It doesn't look like we have an agenda, do we, to approve?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, we do? Oh, I see it. I would like to see if ask if there's any changes to the agenda.
There are not.
Can I have a motion?
Motion to
Second.
approve the agenda.
Second.
Jeffrey Meiselman.
Yes.
Chris Brown.
Yes.
Deidre Strong.
Yes.
Allison Thomas.
Yes.
Mitch Cass is absent. Judy Malika.
Yes.
Gregory Snyder is absent.
Okay, and do we have an approval for the minutes?
This is August 12th minutes, right?
August 12th, and do I do it separate or together?
If there's no changes, if someone wants to make a motion for both, that's fine.
I move to approve both August 12th and September 17th minutes as presented.
Second. He seconded.
Greg Snyder. Er,
Jeffrey Meiselman.
Yes.
Chris Brown.
Yes.
Deidre Strong.
Yes.
Allison Thomas.
yes.
Mitch Cass is absent. Judy Malika.
Yes.
Gregory Snyder is absent.
Okay. Do we have to swear anybody in? No?
Chair, just for the record, seeing no public and the only item being legislative, the board
Okay.
can move past it if it'd like.
That works. For me? Okay. So let's move on to the legislative items.
Nothing. Thank you.
So, the item that we need your input tonight on is an ongoing effort to figure out the best way to make sure our residents know when they are parking in a private parking lot. The ordinance before you, number 1924, is city initiated, and it's intended to adopt regulations governing private parking lots in LDR section 4.3.3, special requirements. Now, we do not have full purview over every aspect of the operations, so it's mostly about making sure there's a lot of good information. It's very clear when you are in a city lot versus when you're not. So I'll give you just a brief overview. Private parking lots have begun to proliferate in downtown areas. Required parking for uses is not required necessarily to be free. And in fact, I think there is also some benefit that if offices are closed at night and their asphalt is metered, there's always a better opportunity for parking if we can, for those types of spaces to be available weekends, evenings. So it's not that what's before you is to try to stop any kind of private parking as a business. It's just more to try to make sure, like I said, everybody understands the rules and nobody's getting those surprise tickets or worse yet, towing or booting. We have had complaints about predatory practices, and while the city does not boot, and things like that, those types of practices we have very little purview over. Right now, we don't have a lot of regulations to govern the use in downtown. Downtown has a primary and a secondary street pattern, and vehicularly oriented uses are not allowed on primary streets. So like Atlantic Avenue you can't tear down a building and build a parking lot that charges, because you're required to have an active use along the street. So it wouldn't be in compliance. But those are more physical form requirements, not so much about the use. So the Florida statutes do govern, and there were some changes, I think, in the last session, or was it the one before? I don't remember it. They're running together now. So, and they do legislate that we have to require that property state that is not operated by a government agency. So we're clearly not the only people in the state having this issue. And you have to clearly show the rates and what are the consequences of violating. There has to be information on the sign where you can send your complaints, and there is supposed to be a grace period posted and an appeal process. So we have some of the businesses out there that I think are working with property owners, and that's when you see this sign here is showing up quite a bit, and that's what has that parking contract, where it says that there's a $125 maximum fee, some of those things. So this is here where there's not a lot of regulation right now is all of the signs that we see proliferating, like park here, pay here. It's, and they're all using like a city blue, right? It really looks like it's a city, a municipal lot. So just kind of everybody is making up what they need. There are also state statutes around towaway zones where you have to sign, usually on the wheel stops or other things, so that people are aware that they're in a towaway zone. There's not a lot of rhyme or reason related to the size, the font. Some people are using Park Mobile, which is what the city uses. Others do other things. So it does create some confusion. So the first step is to try you're required to post a sign at the entrance per state statute. So we are allowed to regulate the time, place, and manner of signage. We can't necessarily always say, limits on other things related to free speech, but so the proposal before you gives a minimum, puts a required dimension on that universal P that says this is parking, and then adds, an orange or red, not a city-owned lot add-on. And part of why we want to do that is we want people to understand they can park there. We want the existing signage that's out there to be easily retrofitted so that you can add it. This is not a city-owned lot, not a city-owned lot. And then another sign that talks about what is the hourly rate, what is the event rate. This is one of the concerns we had from some of our private parking lots, is that prices are dynamic, right? Not every parking space is created equally. Not every parking space is worth $35 on one day versus another. So this has been one of the hardest things, is that we want to make sure that there's something besides the little pay kiosk, that is larger font that tells people this is how much it costs to park here. What happens if you don't pay? Things like that. And then that the operator, their name, there's supposed to be a manned active telephone number that you can call that's been a problem, and an email address. And so this is the full appeal information and things like that. It tend to be on that one contract sign that they can have. So we've gone back and forth between wanting to make it really clear, and then like the DDA was concerned, and I think it was a good concern, about the signage proliferation. So in this case, you would be required to have the sign that says this is available to public parking, but you wouldn't have two. You would just have one at each entrance. So we're trying to make sure there isn't sign litter out there. You have to have the rate, you have to have who's the operator, one sign per entrance, no more than one sign per 10 spaces, because it can get a little crazy. Now, to be fair, I don't think people get confused on this lot. They know where they're parking. It is particularly well signed that it's on a city-owned lot, while others are not quite as clear. There's proposed language that other things related to having a safe operation, that if you're going to be available at night, it should be well lit, particularly in front of the pay kiosk. You cannot use a city logo if you are operating a lot that's not a city lot. And then for adjacent lots with different operators, you have to clearly indicate which spaces are associated with each vendor. So that you're not, that's another thing that's happened, I guess, is that you're looking and you go and you pay for a space and you're paying at the adjacent lot space and not at the one that's regulating where you have parked. And then the penalties for the violations have to be there. This also went to the Historic Preservation Board, and it's good. This is why we take things to boards. So we had added that in historic districts, parking lot signage must maintain the standard blue symbol and contrasting not a city-owned lot signage, but that there would be some more flexibility for the post design, the sign frame, the font, things like that would lend itself to reinforce the character. And the board was actually had a lot of comment that they really felt strongly that part of standardizing things kind of helps send the message when something is, is parking, and that they were worried it would start to look too chaotic if there was too much license. So they had some really good feedback with that. As always, there's comprehensive plan policies about streamlining and having the rules be really clear that apply to everything that this board sees for LDRs. So again, the DDA looked at this back in August. They were concerned about the number of signs and the sign litter. Historic Preservation Board sought more recently in December. They had recommendations about standardizing like the posts, the fonts, and things in different districts, which staff can look at and bring back. You're going to see this. And they were also whether we had paid public parking with not a city-owned lot. It used to say paid parking, not a city-owned lot. And there was that. The use of the word public has been what staff has wrestled with, because public, we're worried it implies that it's civic in nature and therefore city, but maybe the sign on the bottom is enough. So this is, we're definitely want to hear your input. If you particularly agree with the characterization of what the other boards have offered, it's helpful to us if you tell us. And if you've had the experience of using the private lots and have some other suggestions, we're absolutely open to hearing it. It's a little ordinance, but it's caused so much consternation in the city that, for our residents, that we want to be sure that we get it right, or as close to right the first time as we can. So your options tonight are to move approval, with amendments. If you think this is a terrible idea, then move denial, or you could continue. But the commission is asking for it, so we really would like to move it forward, and we would incorporate any input, and then we'll let we'll bring all of the advisory boards comments to the commission for a final action. So that completes my presentation. I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you. Okay, any comments from the board?
Yes.
Please.
Althea, I have a couple of suggestions.
Okay.
I've written parking ordinances for the city of West Palm and for the city of Pompano Beach. I'm very much aware of this problem, so I have a couple of suggestions in your language. I'm going to first give you an example. In Pompano Beach, there's private lots, and they copy the citation of the city exactly, the same font, the same words. Mm-hmm. They even copy the logo, although they don't say city, they say XYZ Parking Company. And West Palm was a little more aggressive because they have so many more events in downtown West Palm. Sunfest is a real problem. Mm-hmm. And they asked me to write a section where in order to have a private lot, you decide, I'm not gonna tell you what to do, but you decide, you must register with the city if you're going to open a private lot, and you must pay a fee annually. The other thing I would suggest is that, let's see, and they cannot copy, they can't copy the citation.
So the citation has to use different font and things than the one the city generates, or?
You can't, you have to really work on seeing that it's different than the City of Pompano citation when you look at the private citation.
Okay.
So it cannot resemble in any fashion that. Well, the reason I know they do it is because people get a ticket from the private lots in Pompano, and they go to the parking office. Well,
Yeah, okay,
I'm a
depending.
consultant, a parking consultant to the City of Pompano Beach, and I go to the parking office a couple of times a month, and they show me the tickets that look like our tickets,
Wow.
our city tickets. It's pretty clever, you know. But you're right; they're very. What was the word you used earlier?
Predatory.
Predatory. Yes, they can be very predatory. Now, you know, frankly, how much you'd have to ask Mr. Bennett, but I don't know how much enforcement they really have. Whether to pay the ticket or not.
Oh, I didn't pay it. Nothing happened.
I would.
I'm just like, yeah, forget it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Judy.
Yeah.
And they certainly can't do what the city of Delray Beach does. You get a ticket, you don't pay it, and it doubles in 2 weeks or triples or whatever. It gets up there after a while. They can't do that.
Right. The Florida statute does cover what you just mentioned, though, that the invoices it has to state on it that it's privately issued, it's not issued by a government authority, and it's not subject to criminal penalties. That has to be on the invoice for the private owners, whatever they
Has to
send
be
out.
on the citation.
Yes,
And we can
We can add
take a look at it, but I would have some concerns just because the statute states that the municipality cannot enact
Right.
an ordinance or regulation restricting or prohibiting a right of the private property owner. The signage specifically has language stating that the city is allowed to regulate signage, but we can certainly take a look at it before it goes to commission and see if that's something that's available.
Yeah, no,
to the city.
I had in Pompano, I tried to do what I did in West Palm, and the city attorney in Pompano said, no, we're not going to go that far, Chris, you know, of making them fill out applications and that sort of thing. But the city attorney, in my opinion, in Pompano made a mistake. And we get all these people coming into the parking office saying, why did you give me a ticket? And the director says, but it's not our ticket, I'm sorry. It's a fake.
So what we'll do is right now the ordinance, the bottom of page 3 does speak to the logos, and it says that the private provider may not use the logo of the city of Delray Beach or a logo that resembles it on any signage or printed material. And then 4 goes to the violation enforcement, and I made a note there, and Mr. Bennett and my team will look into the invoice, because if the statute gives a little bit of leeway, I mean, even if we don't write it down, you still have to do what the state says. It's just nice if it's like,
Well, the
you
state
can't-
tells them they're
Yeah.
supposed to put all the rates and everything. You're
Right.
just saying, put not a city-owned lot on it,
Right,
and don't use our logo,
right.
right?
At least the not a city-owned lot should be something.
Well, you
We'll
you
look
see
at
this.
that.
Yeah,
That's a
I
good
think
idea.
you're
I didn't even think about that.
Well taken. I don't think you want to stop people from having private parking lots, because one of the city's goals is to provide either through the public services or private services parking. And what's happened in the world of parking is it's so expensive for cities to build parking. I mean, not to mention parking garages, even parking on streets is expensive. That we in Pompano, I don't, that's the only place I can tell you, we encourage the private sector to open up lots. We don't encourage them to give out citations that are fake.
So, Anthea, when you said they objected to 2 signage, they meant not to have the parking sign or not to have the didn't have a problem with the rates and the not city-owned lot thing behind it or under it, correct?
Well, I think the issue
On
with
each
the
entrance?
the issue with the rate was there was concern that, you know, we're going to charge more in season than if we're going to charge somewhere else, and you're going to make me print this sign that says $10 an hour, but, you know, maybe when the Christmas tree is getting lit, and that's why we put the event parking
yeah.
rate on there. And so I think that was the only real concern that I heard from the private providers, which I can understand. It's the base of the business, right? You're doing it to collect parking, you know. So my
If I'm
concern.
gonna own this lot and
Right.
crank up the rates during season, I can change the sign, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Right?
Sign-based
Yeah, let's see.
changes are
Reason
not.
why not, yeah.
Yeah, sign-based
Judy,
changes
do you
are
have
not
a problem?
requiring a permit. So.
No, I don't, Well, my yard, people
I have
think that's a lot,
A question.
yeah.
Does the statute require that they put the rate on there, or is that just something that the city is proposing?
That
for
is
the
the
amendment?
biggest issue that our constituents are concerned about, is that they get surprised that, you know, they didn't realize that it was going to be this expensive.
Yeah, $9,000 or something, it's ridiculous what they charge,
mean-
truly.
Yeah. So,
Yes, sir.
and then the other big concern we get is the booting and whether or not we can control that, and we can't. And I got booted in West Palm. That's where I live. So they just show up with a card reader, you know, so it's not fun.
Yeah.
For any of us. But so the main thing is just to make sure everybody kind of knows what the rules are and where they're parking, and that's the biggest goal that we have right now.
And there's been a lot of complaints that I've heard, especially in certain parking lots, that they leave and there's either upwards of hundreds of dollars of a fine if they go over by like 2 minutes. And so it's been I'm very pleased that we're doing this, because I think it's
Yeah.
helpful for the constituents and people that are visiting.
The
To
citizens
have it
one at the
clear.
commission one, I was 1 minute and got a boot. I watched the guy put it on, I'm like,
Yeah.
I had to pay that one.
Yeah.
Boot price.
Had to get the boot off.
Yes.
That's the only way to get it off.
Now,
Shows
could
up
you
with a card reader.
could you please go back and see? I believe I think I agree with the historical board when it comes to. I don't necessarily know if we have to limit the signs, our signs, but I think if it's area specific, that might be helpful as well. You know, so sort of
Yeah,
near.
we were a little surprised that their perspective was that they actually thought the signage should be standardized in the district.
More
So
uniform.
I think, which makes sense, because if you own a lot in a historic district and I own a lot, I think the idea is that the style should be the same if we're in the same district. We're both in Marina, here's what we're gonna do. And maybe that departs a little bit from the city standard, but that you shouldn't have your own interpretation and I have mine, I guess. I don't know. I was a little surprised by it, and I think it's something we're going to look into maybe a little bit more.
Or if there's some way that we could make the city public municipal parking one way, and then give parameters, very much like we do on the signs on our buildings,
Right.
and maybe it's clearer there. But I appreciate this. I'm all for it.
Great.
Any other comments? Can I get a motion?
Yes, I would move a recommendation of approval of ordinance 19-24, amending LDR section 4.3.3, special requirements for specific uses of land development regulation, to adopt subsection PP, private parking lots and garages, with regulation governing such use, finding that the amendment and the approval thereof is consistent with the comprehensive plan and meets the applicable criteria set forth in the land development regulations.
Second.
Jeffrey Meiselman,
Yes.
Chris Brown,
Yes.
Deidre Strong,
Yes.
Allison Thomas,
Yes.
Mitch Katz is absent, Judy Malika,
Yes.
Gregory Snyder is absent.
Because I believe, I have to look at the calendar, but I think we always have to adjust January, February, depending on how the calendar falls for President's Day and Martin Luther King Day. So just please be mindful. I'm going to check to see if that was this year. Yeah, so normally you would have been meeting on the 20th, which is Martin Luther King Day, so you'll be shifting to the end of January, the 27th, for the next meeting. And let me see, is February working the same
President's
way?
Day. February.
Yes.
February is President's Day, so it will shift from the 17th to the 24th, so please mark your calendars. I think that's about it. In lieu, for that, for those of you who are tracking it, did pass at the last city commission meeting. They did take the previous rates and sort of adjust the dollar amount that was approved in 2017 for what that value amount would be now. So it, the core of downtown was 23,000, I think 600 before, and it's up to 30,000 now per space. So that was one of the, I think, the larger LDR amendments that had gone through. And I already have 2 applications coming in at that, so, you know, they're willing to go. But now we have at least a measurable standard within a certain limited distance to make sure that we do have the parking. And I think the other big shift was that in lieu, the commission at the workshop that we had held it to facilitate redevelopment that is up to 2 stories. Anything sort of bigger than that, you really need to make sure you've got the parking, or else cut the 3rd or 4th story off and make sure we're not overbuilding. So I think that was the big LDR that changed in terms of an update. And that's it. I'm here if you have questions.
Anyone have anything? No? Do you have any comments?
No, just hope everybody enjoys their holiday break. We'll see you in January.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Well, this might be a new record.
I know, that was a quick one.
We're adjourned.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Happy birthday to me in 2 days.
Mine's tomorrow. Happy birthday.